Born December 2nd, 1765, and died March 11th, 1835, Asa Ransom lived for 70 years. We're here in Clarence Fillmore Cemetery at the site of Asa Ransom's grave. During his life, he would have seen significant changes in the United States. But Asa Ransom was also a catalyst for change in Western New York. Born in Massachusetts, he was one of the first settlers of the town of Clarence in New York and was a pioneer of the area. As important as Asa Ransom is to Clarence, there is still much unknown about his life. Today, we're going to explore one of those mysteries. Asa Ransom's Tavern was built in the spring of 1799. It was 46 feet long and 2 stories high. Asa Ransom moved into the tavern with his wife and 10 children. It is not entirely known where the tavern was or is located. A common theory is that it is located at 10897 Main Street. We interviewed Heath Simzak to further explore this theory. My first question is, you chose to preserve this location, right?
I did, yes.
So why did you choose to do that?
Well, I've always loved history, and I was living in Wyoming County, and I wanted to live in a historic home. So I started doing some searching, and came across this one, and this is the most historic house I could find, so I definitely wanted to purchase it and preserve it.
My second question to you, what's so special about Asa Ransom and this house, I guess?
Well, Asa Ransom, I should mention too, I'm Heath Simzak, by the way, and I'm on the Historic Preservation Commission here in Clarence. And I'm also a trustee of the Buffalo Niagara Heritage Village. So history and preservation is very important to me. And Asa Ransom was a very important person in the history of Clarence and in the history of Erie County. I mean, Erie County started with Clarence. The first meeting of the town of Buffalo will be held in the Tavern of Elias Ransom, which is the brother of Asa Ransom. So they were going to have the very first meeting of the town of Buffalo there. But then it also mentions specifically in the law that created Buffalo that the next meeting of the town of Clarence will be held at the house of Asa Ransom, which was his tavern.
Do you think this house is the location of the tavern?
I do.
Okay.
He created a map in 1804 with only one home on the whole map, okay? And by 1805, that one home was gone. It had disappeared. So it never appeared on another map again other than Ellicott's Morris Purchase map, which is interesting. But the question is, well, where did it go, right? Mm-hmm. So the questions are, well, how can we conclude that? And two, how the heck did it get here? Either burned down or it was moved. If it was moved, the question is, are there any homes in the vicinity of the original location that resemble what we think Ransom's Tavern would be? And this house does. It fits Ellicott's description. It's a 2-story log home, and it was built according to all the historians around 1800. The hardware in the doors and in the other room too, if you want to take a look, it dates to the 1790s, and the house itself was built around 1800. So the next thing you would want to say, okay, well, you could check that box off because it fits Ellicott's description, and it's near the original location of where Ransom's Tavern was. It's just down the street. How did this house get here and who owned it? So you want to eliminate this house as a possibility as being Ransom's Tavern. So that would include, well, do we know who built the house? Do we know when it was built? Do we know who lived here? And the thing is, we don't know any of that. So this house is a mystery by itself. And this is referred to as either the Brace House or the Rice Sinclair House. But the thing is, there's no record of anybody ever building this house. There's no record of anyone living in this house until 1850. So you have a house that was built in 1800s. And we do have some records on that. This was a 1997 article in the Clarence Bee. And John Conlon, who's a historian, he opined that this was in fact Asa Ransom's Tavern, that the style, he's an expert in dating the construction of buildings. And he in fact said, this building was built in 1800. It fits Ellicott's description, and there's only one two-story log home that was ever known to be built in Clarence, and that was Ransom's Tavern. And this one drives me batty because this is from 1876. This is the history of Erie County. And one of the gentlemen that was interviewed in here and this was 1876, I mean, this was a long time ago. One of the gentlemen interviewed for this book was a guy by the name of Lenzia Hamlin. And there's a whole passage on here. He came to Clarence in 1805. He was 11 years old, and he talks about he remembers the tavern, he remembers the gristmill, he remembers the sawmill. So the guy is still alive in 1876 when he's interviewing him. And he talks about all of these things, but this historian never asked him, where's the tavern? He would have known. Lenzia Hamlin knew, but they didn't ask him. So there's nothing in any of the history books what happened to Ransom's Tavern. We were able to get a little snippet on the history of this house before he passed, and it was just, I guess, coincidence. But here, here's the whole article. The article itself is about another mystery. There was a love triangle murder mystery in Clarence, and the article wasn't about the tavern or about this house, but he does talk about the house. So I blew up a part of it, and this is the part where they talk about the house you're sitting in right now. And we see DJ Sinclair. It was DJ Sinclair who invited us across the threshold into his cool parlor. This, he said, is one of the oldest houses in the state. It is older than Buffalo, built long before the War of 1812. It was built entirely of logs, which were subsequently hidden by clapboarding. The walls are therefore very thick. Once upon a time, it was used as a road inn. Okay, so that's a tavern. So he's saying it was a tavern, and that the little closet sunk in the wall, and he's probably standing right here. And he's saying that was part of the liquor cabinet, that was part of the tavern. So the tap room where the liquor was stowed. And this is where we're getting to the answer of how this house ended up here, the tavern ended up here. Upstairs there was a large room where a lodge of masons met. Okay, so now we're getting to the answer of the mystery. And why this was so secret. Why was it so secretive? And here, this is just an old picture. This is what the house would have looked like at the time. That was from 1914, so a few years before this article. So we have one two-story log home built around 1800 that disappeared from the hollow. And we have another large two-story log home built around 1800 that just appeared mysteriously on East Hill. So, you know, to me at least, the structures fit. They have to be one and the same. It doesn't make any sense that nobody would have lived here, or no record of this house being built. So then the question is, who moved here? And we're getting a hint there is the Masons. This is Anita Baker's History of the Town of Clarence, this red book here. I have a printout here. And this is where she talks about this house. And she says, you know, whatever the early history of this house is, nobody knows. She's basically saying, we have no idea how this house got here on East Hill. We have no idea who built it. And she calls it a mystery. She says, I don't know why this guy, Archibald S. Clark, and this guy, Rhodes Stranahan, a member of Clarence's first family, why their names are associated with this house, because they know for a fact they never lived here, neither of them did. So who are those guys? Who is Archibald Clark and who's Rhodes Stranahan? This again, we're going back to the title search, and you'll see this is what she's talking about. We have Archibald Clark, and then we have Rhodes Stranahan. Both of these gentlemen, prominent members of Clarence community. In fact, Archibald Clark served in Congress. He took over Peter Porter's seat after he stepped down. He's a very influential gentleman, but how do they fit into this equation? It's from a book, Freemasonry in Erie County. And this dated to 1884. We have a notation here for what's called Center Lodge 356. And it talks about the petitions being submitted starting in 1814 by a number of individuals, including Asa Harris, but recommending that Archibald Clark be the first master of the lodge. So here we have Archibald Clark, the master of the Mason Lodge, was the owner of this land right here. And it goes on and on talking about the procedure of how the petition kind of just sat for a while, and they had the right to get some action on it to get it approved. But then there was another petition where Roach Stranahan was mentioned in, and I actually have copies of all those documents right here.
Are those original copies?
These are copies, these are just printouts I made, but these were facsimiles that I had were sent to me by the Grand Lodge in New York City of the Masonic Society, and they were kind enough to provide me with copies of these. So here's the petition from 1814. And you'll see it talks about James Baldwin, here, Archibald Clark will be the first master, and you'll see his signature. John Stranahan. Roach Stranahan wasn't on this one. John Stranahan was, who was the cousin of Roach Stranahan. So this is from 1814. And then they wrote some additional petitions. And this one was from 1816. And they talk about David Conkey will be the first master, and Roach Stranahan to be the first senior warden. I don't know what that means, but it sounds important. So, but this one you actually have Roach Stranahan signing and Archibald Clark. There were a bunch of Stranahans, George and John too. So there's where these Masons met, according to Donald Sinclair, was it right in this building. And it was pretty common back in the early 1800s for Mason groups to meet inside of taverns. It was a common place for Masons to meet, so it would make sense. So the question is though, when did these guys move it here, and when did they start using it as a Masonic lodge? Guess when Roach Stranahan purchased this land? June 25th, 1835. So shortly after Asa Ransom passed away, Roach Stranahan actually purchased this property. But the tavern was empty at that point, so I think it was in 1837 that they purchased the tavern and moved it here. You know, there were probably a lot of people in the Hollow still, in the village, that were not real keen on the idea of the Masons even buying the tavern. It was probably a very venerated building. It was the first building in the town. It was owned by the Ransoms, built by the Ransoms. Joseph Elliott lived there. Theodosia Burr stayed there. You know, it was a very important building. So for the Masons to kind of take it over, you know, in the 1830s, I think a lot of people probably were not pleased with that. And that's probably why the Masons said, you know what, rather than being in the dead heart of the village, we're gonna have a little more privacy. We're gonna go up on East Hill where there aren't a lot of people, and you know, that way we won't have a lot of disapproving eyes on us all the time. So I think that's why the decision was made to move it out of the Hollow and up here on East Hill, just for privacy and to get away from some of that disapproval. And why did they stop using this? So Roach Stranahan, he passed away in 1844, and you'll notice a very prominent Masonic symbol. This is not far from Asa Ransom's grave over in the Clarence-Fillmore Cemetery. But after 1844, this house kind of falls into there was some litigation involved with he died without a will. And so there was some battle for a few years, but that's how the house ended up with the Rice Sinclair family in 1850, is after he passed away in 1844. It kind of sat vacant for a while, and then the Rice Sinclair family, who had been down in Black Rock, came out to Clarence and were able to purchase the house in 1850. The Brace family had the house until 2008. So ironically, both the Brace family and the George Brace, 1944, each of those families had the house longer than the Ransoms. The Ransoms had it for 37, 38 years. The Brace Sinclair family, the Masons had it from 1837, 1838 to 1844. So, like 7, 8 years. And then the Brace family had it for, from 1944 to 2008. So it's ironic that, the Ransom family only had it for about 38 years, but, they are the significant part of the history of it. It would be nice to have a document or a letter that said, hey, we moved the tavern.
To solve all our problems.
Right.
With the information we have gathered from the Clarence Historical Museum and from our interview with Heath Simzak, our conclusion is that 10897 Main Street is the true location of the Asa Ransom Tavern. We believe that when the Freemasons bought the tavern, they moved it to East Hill from its original location.